Hello YouTube. This is my first video. If you guys don't know who I am Heart of the Cards. I stream on Twitch, and I am currently the top 8th player in Snap right now. I mostly play Surfer, but my videos will cover a range of different decks. And the point of my videos are very much not to tell you what deck to play or how to play certain decks. I will teach you about other decks. I personally am a Surfer one trick. I pretty much play Surfer into every meta, but I customize my decks according to meta, and I know a lot about matchups. So what I want to convey to you in this is how to beat decks. What's the popular deck? You don't have to play the popular deck. I'm not telling you to play the popular deck. I'll tell you how the popular deck works, how to beat it, what interesting interactions you can have with that deck, and very much you'll learn about. Maybe you are a player of this deck. You'll learn about how to play this deck potentially better because you understand the deck better. And if not, if you're not a player of this deck, it doesn't matter because this will help you play against the deck, which is popular, and you'll probably be seeing a lot. So the first deck I'm going to cover, obviously, is Thanos. Thanos is a plague to the meta right now. If you don't have a solution to deal with Thanos, you are pretty much screwed because you are seeing that, at least for me, in like top meta, I'm seeing Thanos like every 5 games at least. Some days I'm seeing him like 3 out of 5 games. So let's see how you beat Thanos. So the first thing to understand about Thanos is there is two variations of Thanos. There's Thanos Ongoing and Thanos Supreme. Thanos Ongoing is the list on the top. It very much relies on his 1-drops and Thanos as a resource to the deck to scale other cards. What I mean by this is you look at Goliath. Goliath scales directly with Thanos stones because a lot of the Thanos stones are ongoing, making Goliath bigger. Dazzler scales directly with Thanos stones because Thanos stones fill the board, they scale Dazzler. Blue Marvel literally scales with Thanos stones because he is buffing each stone on board, so he's buff. He's buffing each stone on board, so he's giving power directly to the Thanos stones. Spectrum scales with Thanos stones. A lot of them are ongoing. He plays for a lot more points the more Thanos stones are on board. Obviously, Thanos scales with his Thanos stones because the stones are meant for him. Mockingbird also scales with Thanos stones. So it's very important to understand that the core of the Thanos ongoing deck are the stones. And the best and most intuitive way to target Thanos ongoing is to target the stones. Now, Thanos Supreme is a bit different. Thanos Supreme has two interesting things. First of all, Thanos Supreme relies a lot more on interaction. So if you don't die to the interaction in Thanos Supreme, you don't really have to worry about the interaction in Thanos Supreme. Like, if you're good against Cosmo, you're good against Juggernaut, you're good against Red Guardian, you're good against Allied. If you're good against those interaction pieces, that is a large part of that deck. The other thing, and this is something you can actually target, is how that deck creates power. How that deck creates power is in opposite to Thanos Ongoing. Thanos Ongoing says, I want all the Thanos scalers. I want everything to be scaling with the stones. Thanos Supreme says, no, I don't want that. I want a bunch of interaction. I want to be a bit more flexible into my matchups. I want to have control over how the other person is able to scale. However, Thanos Supreme, because of that, does not have a lot of scalers directly related to the Thanos stones. Basically what it says is, instead of having all these scalers, I'm just having Mockingbird and Just Strange. In this sense, you can target those two, and you can also see when they have bad draw. Like, if they don't have Strange Supreme, they don't have anything to really buff with the stones except for Mockingbird. They're playing a pretty regular deck. Maybe their Wiccan doesn't go off. You can realize when they're having a bit of a bad curve because there's either a lack of stones, there's a lack of Strange Supreme, or maybe they don't get their Wiccan to really pop off their curve. So a deck like that, you can very much realize when they're playing good or when they're playing bad because they rely on so few scalers, where Thanos Ongoing is extremely consistent in having a bunch of scalers and can go really high because of the sheer amount of scalers it has. But it's a bit easier to tech for. So the card and general deck breakdown is Thanos stones are the resource that you use. Thanos uses to gain power. Not just Thanos, but his deck as a whole. That's the resource he uses to gain power. Think of it like a fighting game. You know the ultimate meter in a fighting game? Every stone adds to that ultimate meter. When he hits 6 stones, he's pretty much at his ultimate. He is their pop off because he has 6 stones. But if you are able to deplete that resource meter, Thanos' deck, especially the ongoing version, is not able to scale properly because you're bringing down that resource meter so they don't have resources. So it's just a constant ticking clock that you can take a mental note of how many stones they play, and the more stones they play, the better off that Thanos deck is. So it's very much a deck that relies on the single resource to scale every other thing. Thanos decks are very much a Thanos deck where everything is revolving around the stones, which is a very cool, like, conceptually, that's a very cool thing. Like, the stones not only make Thanos stronger, but his entire deck is a very cool. What this means, though, is you have a specific target point that's very intuitive to beat Thanos decks. It's target the stones. If you can target the stones, your deck almost always has a positive matchup into Thanos because it's so reliant on the stones. In these stones, there's a bunch of them. Most of them don't really matter too significantly. They're like little pluses there. The two you really want to target are Power Stone, because it will make Thanos into the 622, which is very hard to deal with. And Soul Stone, because if you're running something like Shang-Chi and Negasonic, if you can get rid of Soul Stone, it opens up your counter ability to Thanos a lot more. Another interesting stone, depending on the location, could be a move stone. You might want to target a move stone on board if there's like a lockdown location. That's interesting. And there's probably many ways to counter this. The three I immediately think of is Killmonger. Killmonger essentially has... Now we're imagining this ultimate resource meter. Let's say he's at 4/6 of the meter. Killmonger essentially brings him back down to 0/6. Killmonger basically deletes that meter, so he's not able to ultimate. So if you think of Thanos as, like, with this analogy as a fighting game character, we are just removing his ultimate meter, we're removing his resources, which very much affects Thanos a lot. Gorgon does it in a different way. Gorgon says, you know what? You can have your ultimate meter, but you're going to pay twice as much for that ultimate meter. So if your ultimate meter is at 1 out of 6, now you're going to have to do double the damage to me to gain the same ultimate meter. Which is basically saying that Gorgon is very effective against Thanos, because since Thanos is so reliant on the stones as a form of scaling, you're basically saying all your entire ability scale costs 2 more, which is annoying to deal with. And if you're getting a Gorgon on 2, you pretty much always have a positive matchup into Thanos. That's a snap condition into Thanos by itself, because Thanos is so reliant on these stones. They have Mobius to play. Mobius, maybe you play Gorgon on 2, you don't snap on 2, you wait till turn 3, and then you snap if they don't have Mobius. Otherwise, if you're confident that your deck's still pretty good into Thanos, and if they're playing Mobius, they're a bit behind curve, you can just snap on Gorgon. Another way to target this, which is a bit different, and you'll see like Hella decks do this. Not Hella decks aren't really control decks, but they have positive matchups into Thanos because of Gore. And what Gore says is basically, oh, you want to scale off your stones? Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm also going to scale off your stones. So I'm using your resource meter against you, because my resource meter for that particular card in Gore is the same resource meter as your Thanos. So those are 3 different ways to tech against Thanos in the most intuitive way possible, which is tech against it by depleting the resource meter, tech against it by making his resource meter cost more to pop off, or tech against it by sharing the resource meter with something like Gore, which scales off of Thanos stones, because Thanos stones are a bunch of small unreveals. And now, Thanos has another thing that's particularly strong. In the ongoing version, these are ongoing scalers. The ongoing scalers are another thing you can target. They're not as direct as that. And what the ongoing scalers really say is, we're going to scale off of Thanos' stones, and our power output is directly related to Thanos' stones. The problem with this, or the way you can target this, is Thanos, all these ongoing scalers between, if we go back, between Goliath, Dazzler, Blue Marvel, Spectrum, all of those ongoing scalers are entirely reliant on these Thanos stones for power, and they're also ongoing, which makes it another secondary way to tech against it. So there's obviously those stone counters I just mentioned, which basically everything I mentioned in the Thanos part is applicable to the ongoing scalers because they are tied together. The timing on this is, generally, you want to get rid of their resource meter however you're doing. However, in the past about 5 minutes, I explained Thanos' resource meter. If you can get rid of the resource meter, you're already effectively dealing with these ongoing scalers. Secondary way you can do this is you can just turn off the ongoings however you want. Enchantress is the best example of this, whereas your Enchantress, the ongoing scalers, Thanos is kind of screwed because Thanos Ongoing really relies on these ongoing scalers as a way to use the resource meter. So basically, to counter the ongoing scale, instead you're saying, sure, do your resource meter, I don't really care. Your payoff to your resource meter, I will deny that, and that's how I'm going to bring down Thanos. Obviously, there is a method entirely outside of this context of this, which is just go bigger, which I would recommend using Gore. Like, if your plan is just go bigger, just use Gore and go bigger with like a very solid Gore package would be the best way to make your deck a favorable matchup in Thanos. If you just want power and you're not really tech, but if you're using tech, the past 3 tech cards are very good, and specifically into the Thanos Ongoing version, Enchantress is a very great tech card because it basically says your resource meter doesn't matter because I'm going to counter your ultimate. You can ult on me, I'm going to counter it, I'm going to block it. I have a way to deal with this ultimate, so none of what you just did matters. Which is a very strong thing to have. Now the third way Thanos deals with this is the Thanos Ongoing doesn't do this as much. It does with Mockingbird, but Thanos Supreme does this, or it just uses generic scalers. A good example of this is Strange Supreme and Mockingbird. Those are the 2 generic scalers it uses. It uses some Iron Patriot and other stuff to muddy it up, but those aren't cards you can really target because they're just generic pieces that aren't actually what is making this deck pop off. The 2 pop-off pieces is Strange Supreme, Thanos, and Mockingbird. Thanos, you can do the direct counters covered in the previous part. For Strange Supreme and Mockingbird, this is what this part is useful for. So the purpose of Strange Supreme and Mockingbird is basically what this deck is saying is, I don't want a lot of scalers, I'm good with just 2. Maybe 3 if you count Thanos. I'm good with 2 scalers. I'm good with Strange Supreme, I'm good with Mockingbird. So it thins the volume of scalers and relies more on interaction to get more favorable matchups and more customizability for the deck. But the weakness of this is, the scalers are still reliant on Thanos Stones. It's a bit muddied how they're reliant on Thanos Stones, but basically the previous tech cards apply to varying degrees as well. I think Gorgon's the best application of this for the stone counters. Killmonger gets a bit less value, but Killmonger could still be really useful. And Gore gets a bit less value because of Strange Supreme, but Gore could also still be very useful. But there is something notable about this weakness, is it is more reliant on these scalers, meaning it is a lot more beneficial for this generic scalers deck with Strange Supreme and Mockingbird to say, who cares about the Thanos Stones? Who cares about the resource meter? I am just going to target the scalers themselves. With the Strange Supreme version, that is a lot more beneficial than the previous Thanos version. Also notably, Thanos is a lot more vulnerable to tech cards like Shang-Chi, Negasonic, because Strange Supreme a lot of time will be eating that Soul Stone, will be eating that whatever stone. So there's a lot less protection for Thanos in this version of the deck. And this deck is a lot more reliant on Strange Supreme and Mockingbird as scalers, where the Thanos Ongoing deck is a lot more reliant on stones. So the timing for this is, if you want to deny scaling, you have to be proactive, which is basically Gorgon. Gorgon will deny the ability to increase that resource meter effectively, which makes him a very good counter to both the Thanos Ongoing and Thanos Supreme version of the deck. But the timing on this that I want to focus on is the reactive. For this deck is a lot, you can use a lot more reactive tech to remove these 2 specific scalers. I prefer to personally target Strange Supreme. You can also target Mockingbird. So, like I mentioned, the stone counters are there. Basically, any Strange Supreme is extremely vulnerable to any tech. You have Shadow King, you have Shang, you have Red Guardian. Those are like 3 very easy ways to deal with Strange Supreme, and then at that point, the Thanos Supreme deck kind of falls apart a lot quicker than the ongoing deck when you're just dealing with a single scaler. Mobius is an interesting way to tech for like the Iron Patriot in that deck. It also techs for that one Thanos Time Stone. It also techs for Mockingbird. So Mobius could be a pretty good tech card into here, but I think targeting Strange Supreme is probably a bit more beneficial. Notably, how Strange Supreme works, which I will say, this is a very useful tip, is you do not have to destroy Strange Supreme on turn 6. This deck runs Goliath. You don't deal with the guy, like, don't get greedy, just deal with the guy as soon as possible. If you have to play a Shadow King on 5, you've won. You've won that interaction by far. Just play your counter cards as early as possible, or when you expect them not to be able to counter it. Because they have to play Goliath on turn 6 if they don't draw a Wiccan. Like, if Strange Supreme's on board, get rid of him if you have the tech card. Just get rid of him. Think of Strange Supreme as consuming the... Basically, Strange Supreme in of himself is that resource meter I talked about. Strange Supreme says, this resource meter of stones, I'm going to eat them. I'm going to eat... So, let's say you have that 6. Strange Supreme is just directly eating the resource meter. So, let's say Strange Supreme already ate 3 stones. Just think about it. If I were to kill him on 3 stones, that's probably a beneficial interaction for me to do. If I am to Shadow King Strange Supreme after he ate 3 stones, it's a beneficial interaction. You just countered like 5. You countered both Strange Supreme's effect, which is 6 points. You countered 6 points, plus all the stones, plus whatever else you did. And that's Shadow King. That's not even a Shang-Chi, which removes it completely. So my tip to deal with, especially like Strange Supreme, is you don't have to get him to. You don't have to make him a 2/2 on last turn. He could be a 2/6 or 2/8. If you Shadow King them on turn 5, you probably won the interaction because he had like 2-3 stones. You're fine. So don't get greedy with Strange Supreme. A lot of the time, it's just enough to deal. It's just enough to say your resource is back at 0. You can have the last 2 turns of resources. I don't really care. I counted 5 energy worth of resources for you basically, and nullified like 3 turns of progress, which is enough. You're just pushing them down, and then it's very hard for them to climb back up. So remember, with Strange Supreme, earlier attack is often better. And that's pretty much it. That's how you beat Thanos. You very much aim for the stones. You aim for the stones. You're very much focused on denying Thanos' stones first and foremost. You can also go for the scalers, for the ongoing scalers. You obviously use just good ongoing tech. For Strange Supreme, deal with him early as possible when you expect there to be no counterplay. If you're waiting for the Allies, you're playing him wrong. If you're waiting for the Cosmo to come down to protect him, you're playing him wrong. Just punch that Strange Supreme in the face before they can react, and you're perfectly fine. Otherwise, you can also do the strategy of, okay, Strange Supremes, they're consolidate all that power there. Let me win the other 2 lanes. Let that guy let that guy have fun with Strange Supreme in his little corner of the world. I'm gonna put a bunch of power in this lane. I'm gonna juggernaut the other lane. We'll go into Strange Supreme lane. I'll win like that. So very much that Strange Supreme matchup is targeting Strange Supreme in many ways, and then the ongoing is either targeting the stones or less so you're targeting the ongoing. Thank you all for watching. I'll probably come out with a video like this every week, teaching you how to beat like new meta decks. I might do like pre-card reviews too. If you enjoy this, check out my Twitch. There'll be no gameplay after this, but I pretty much stream 5 days a week my gameplay. You can watch the VODs on Twitch too. Thank you all for watching.